Hey everybody, it's Meeps. Today I'm going to be going over some advanced tracking techniques for VTubing and how to use those in custom tools.
I guess you don't get these glorious
You may recall in my tutorial for my custom VTubing software, I mentioned one of the softwares you can use to do VR tracking is virtual motion capture. If you have VR equipment and you want to use that for tracking, then virtual motion capture will do wonders. So we're going to be focusing very heavily on virtual motion capture and how you can tie that in to other softwares you're using to do some cool stuff like full body tracking as well as ARKit tracking at the same time. Stuff like that. And full finger tracking with an Ultraleap device. All at the same time for use in your custom softwares. And yes, that does include MEEP, my free VTubing interaction software. So let's get into it. Okay, we're going to start in VC Face really quick because we're going to be using VC Face as kind of the bridge to connect every form of tracking together before we send it to custom VTubing software. So I'm not going to go over basic setup of how to get it tracking with either your webcam or iPhone ARKit stuff and with Leap Motion. So now that you have the foundation that we can build off of, we get to basically decide what tracking methods we want to use. Now, there's a lot of different options for a lot of different use cases. So I think what I'm going to do is just go over a few examples of how I would approach it. And then from there, you'll be able to determine what setup would work best for you. I'm going to be covering 3 tracking setups. The first is going to be for full body VR gaming. That's gaming with VR games and tracking that in VC Face. The second method will be for more seated at your desk gameplay with some half body tracking. And then the third one is going to be a step up from that. We'll have full body tracking for being able to sit at your desk while also having the freedom to stand up and walk away and all that. All 3 of the setups I mentioned require a piece of software called virtual motion capture. I'll have this download page linked in the description below. There's a free download and a paid version. To do what I'm doing in this tutorial, you will need the paid version. It's 300 Japanese yen a month, but you can also cancel anytime you want. The subscription is not required to use the software, but it is to download it. You can't use the free version because this tutorial highly relies on the VMC protocol motion sender feature, which is only available in the paid versions. Once you download the paid version, you'll get a zip file with contents that look like this on the left here. And then what you'll want to do is launch virtual motion capture. I will also note that you'll want Steam open because launching virtual motion capture will also launch Steam VR if it's not already open. When the software loads, you'll be greeted with 2 windows. This main window that will be a blank light blue background, and then the control panel. To load in your avatar, you'll go to the control panel, settings, and hit open VRM. Then you'll be prompted to select a file, you select your avatar, and then you're good. It's worth noting if you're like me and use a VSF avatar inside of VC Face, you can still get this to work perfectly fine. You just select the VRM version of your avatar if you have it, which hopefully you do, and you use that in virtual motion capture. As long as the 2 different versions of the avatar still have the same skeletal structure, you should have no problems mix and matching. Before I get into specific setup ideas, I'm going to go over the basic layout of virtual motion capture and its setting tabs so that you can start to get an idea of what we're dealing with here. So the first thing to look at is lip sync. If you want to use lip sync separate from VC Face's lip sync and you want to try out their lip sync, what you can do is choose your microphone and there you go. It's doing some lip sync in virtual motion capture. The next tab here is face. You can use this to set up stuff like auto blink. You'll notice that the character blinks every 1 to 10 seconds. You can also set its default expression. Most of the magic happens in the settings tab here. We're going to start in the setting button area here, this menu. All right, this menu is a little overwhelming to look at, I know, but we're going to be focusing on a few things in here specifically. This VMC protocol motion sender and the tracker assignment settings. This is where most of the magic happens here in this menu. All right, if you remember early on in this video, I mentioned we're using VC Face as a bridge for all of our tracking methods so that we can get virtual motion captures, VR tracking mixed with VC Face's ARKit tracking, mixed with the Leap motion tracking, all of that together. So one big important step before we can get into specifics of how we get virtual motion capture to do tracking is to get virtual motion capture data sent to VC Face. So you go up into the setting menu in the control panel. And once you open that, you're looking for this checkbox that says enable OSC motion sender. Once you turn that on, it's going to start streaming the motion data to this computer on this port. Now, this computer is local host. That's what this number means. It means local host, meaning the computer that VMC virtual motion capture is running on. In this example, of course, we're sending the data to VC Face, which is on the same computer. So local host, this number here works perfectly fine. But if you're trying to send it to another computer that is running a software that you're trying to send motion data to, you'd put the IPv4 of that computer here. But again, for this example, this is just fine. As for port, by default, it's this 39539. That's the port that a lot of apps will use by default for OSC motion capture. In fact, it's the one that MEEP uses. So you'll see, since I turned that on, MEEP is actually getting the motion capture data from virtual motion capture. If I turn it off, of course, it's going to stop. So that's an example. But again, we're trying to send this to VC Face and not MEEP. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this port to 39538. So just change that 9 at the end to an 8, hit apply. And now it's no longer sending that data to MEEP. It's sending it to the port 39538, which now we can hook up in VC Face. So to do that, we're going to go to Settings in VC Face, General Settings, and then scroll down to the OSC/VMC protocol section. We're going to be ticking on this OSC/VMC receiver. You'll note that it says it disables tracking, which is true for the most part, but there's also some quirks with it, which we'll talk about briefly here in a second. But I'm just going to tick it on and show you that now we do indeed have the virtual motion capture tracking going into VC Face. So the quirks that I mentioned here are that while it's getting the motion capture data from virtual motion capture, it's actually also adding the tracking data from ARKit. So you can see my eyes and stuff are still able to respond via ARKit. And it's also still doing the lip sync from VC Face, which is causing my mouth to get like much larger than it appears in virtual motion capture. And as well as some other quirks, like when the auto blink goes off, it can cause the eyes to do some weird stuff. The fix for this will depend on your specific setup, but there's obviously two options here. You can either disable the lip sync and blinking from virtual motion capture, or you could disable the ARKit and lip sync in VC Face. Again, that depends on the setup that you're using. So I will go over the correct settings for each individual setup that I'm showing off here in just a second. So the first setup we're going to be doing is for VR gaming. That is playing VR games on stream and getting that data into your custom VTuber softwares. So what I'm going to be using for this particular setup is 2 Valve Index controllers and a Valve Index, as well as a Vive facial tracker. You can use any type of VR headset and VR controllers for this, of course, as long as they work in Steam VR. And the Vive facial tracker is completely optional, but I figured I might as well show that as an example. Now for this particular setup, since we're going to be wearing a VR headset, we don't really need the iPhone ARKit tracking because it will not work anyway. So I'm going to disable that. And then at this point, you can decide whether you prefer the lip sync in virtual motion capture or you prefer the lip sync in VC Face. Now I've already got my VR equipment plugged in and turned on and all of that. So we're going to move right into setting up the tracking. To do that, we'll go to the Settings tab, go into the Setting menu, and then open up Tracker Assignment Settings. That opens up another window here, and this is when we get to decide which VR controller or tracker goes to which body part in virtual motion capture. By default, it will have your HMD, which is your VR headset, as the head, and your controllers as left and right hands. You can specify exactly which controller it will be by using the drop downs, but it should auto detect it perfectly fine based off of the fact that it knows which is your left controller and which is your right controller, because SteamVR knows. But if you want to set it manually just to make sure, what you can do is you can actually take, let's say, your left hand controller and start shaking it about. And right now I'm shaking the controller in my hand, and you'll notice that it's turning green in this list. That's how I can know which controller is which. So then I can come to the drop down, you'll see it's green, that's my left hand controller. I can now do the same thing with the right controller, start shaking that around, and then you can set your right hand that way. If you want to go even more advanced, you can even set the distance between your wrist and the tracker. You don't have to mess with this, but if you really want to get it specific to make sure that the tracker is represented properly on your avatar, messing with these settings can help. Once you have these all set to what you want, then you can hit close. One thing you might notice start to happen is that your character might start emoting randomly, and that's because by default there's actually some bindings to the joystick on your controllers that cause you to switch through emotes, and I'll show you really quick how to customize that before we add anything. But you can close this menu, and now let's pull up that emote menu. So to set that, you go to shortcut key. That opens up this menu. You can mess around with it if you want, though, but basically these are the bindings for the different blend shapes and all that kind of stuff. If you want to get rid of it all entirely, you can come select from preset and click clear config, and now it will just not do anything when you touch the joysticks. So yeah, now once you have all those trackers assigned, you're just going to want to put on your VR headset, put on your controllers, and then you're going to hit calibration. You can mess with the different calibration modes on your own, but normal mode is just fine. And then you're going to assume the pose that your avatar is in right now, and then hit calibration. So I'm going to do that right now. You'll see it gives you a countdown as well. All right, now that we've got it tracking in virtual motion capture, of course, with the index, we also get finger tracking with the knuckles controllers. But yeah, we get tracking with our head, our hands, our fingers, and yeah, now the last step is going to be the Vive facial tracker, which I'll show you guys really quick for those of you who do use that. Okay, so to set up the facial tracker, you go to Settings in Virtual Motion Capture. Go down to this Vive Lip Tracker button, and it'll pull up this menu. On this menu, you have the lip shapes and blend shapes. Lip shapes are the possible tracker shapes. So these are the things that the Vive Facial Tracker is looking for. And on the right is your blend shapes that you're associating with those tracking shapes. So for example, my avatar has a bunch of blend shapes for this kind of stuff. So if we want to associate a blend shape with moving our jaw to the right, then we just find the blend shape that we want to associate. In this case, jaw right. And we click on that. Jaw left, we do the same. I'm not going to do all of these because it's going to take me a while and I just want to get done with it. So I'm just going to hit use and hit register. And now I'm going to put it on my face and kind of just move my mouth around a little bit so you can see that it's working. So yeah, that's how you'd set that up, but I'm just going to turn it back off so that I don't have to worry about that. Now that we've done that, of course, we need to get all of this tracking data from our VR and our facial tracker and our headset tracking. We need to get all of that into our VTubing software, like MEEP, for example. So how do we do that? Well, it's as simple as going into VC Face, General Settings, and going to OSC VMC Protocol Settings again, and checking on Send Data with OSC VMC Protocol. You're going to put your IP of the computer running MEEP or whatever software in here. And for MEEP, the port that it's looking for is 39539 by default. So set it to that. And then now you'll see all of our tracking is in MEEP as well. Woohoo! Now, of course, this isn't the way I recommend doing it if you're actually like actively sitting at a computer and trying to use the computer. This is really only useful for if you're doing like VR games where you're already wearing your VR equipment with your VR headset on, because if you're like working at a computer and have knuckles controllers on, you're not going to be able to like hit keys or move your mouse around or anything like that. You're not going to be able to see the computer very well because you have a VR headset on. So there are solutions for that kind of setup, which is what we'll be going over next. But this, again, this works perfectly if you're playing VR games. All right, so we're going to get into our next setup now. This one's made for more stationary gaming. People who are playing at a desk with a mouse, a keyboard, and aren't really planning on getting up and walking around much during their streams. So the equipment I'm using is a Ultraleap 3DI hand tracker. This could be substituted with a Leap Motion. An iPhone for ARKit facial tracking. You can also substitute that for a webcam. And then I'm using 3 Tundra trackers. Of course, these can also be Vive trackers, 3.0 or 2.0, any kind of VR tracker. I chose the Tundra trackers here because they're the smallest ones. And we have these strapped to the back of our hands as well as on top of our head. So the Tundra trackers are the smallest and lightest ones. So if I'm going to be having them strapped to my hands for a long time, I think the light ones are the choice. So again, as you can see here in SteamVR, I have my 3 trackers connected to SteamVR. And yeah, again, one of these are on each hand and on my head. So now let's set that up in virtual motion capture and then recalibrate. Even if you're using face tracking through a webcam or ARKit, you still need a tracker on your head, because if you didn't have that, then it wouldn't know where your head is in 3D space relative to all your other VR trackers. So again, we go to settings, open tracker assignment. And then in here, we're going to do something very similar to what we did before. But in this case, our head is no longer our HMD. It's the Tundra tracker that's on our head. So I'm going to just shake my head around. And now we'll see that this is the tracker on my head. And then we can do the same thing with my left hand. Shaking it around. That's good. And right hand. It seems to be this one right here. So now I have all of that set up. Okay, so then also what I did here is made sure that ARKit was turned on, because we'll be using ARKit for this setup, of course. And then I turned on the lip sync in VC Face, turned off the lip sync in VMC, and turned off auto blink, because we're going to be again using ARKit to do all of our face movements, so we don't want it to be doubling by using the VMC ones. So then our next step here, of course, is to go to settings, hit calibration. You can see our Tundra trackers are showing up here as little balls, and we're going to hit normal mode and hit calibration, and then do the T pose. And once it hits 0, you'll see, there you go. We now have our VR tracking being sent over. You'll see on the right here, it doesn't have our ARKit tracking, but on the left, it has our ARKit tracking. There is one more step here. You'll notice I don't have finger tracking here. So how do I get finger tracking? Well, you'll notice Leap Motion is turned on, but it's still not going to work. So to get that to happen, you got to go into settings, general settings, and then come down to the OSC VMC protocol section again. And under receiver, you're going to want to click apply VC face tracking. There's a lot of options here, like applying VC face expressions, as well as tracking facial features. This is for if you don't have ARKit and you want the webcam facial tracking, this will enable that. And then of course, the important one here is track fingers. Once you have all of that turned on, you'll now see that the Ultraleap is going to allow you to control your fingers here on the VC face screen on the left. Of course, the Ultraleaps are a little finicky sometimes, so it's hard for me to show. But yeah, you can see it's working there. All right, there's not that much more to show at this point. We're just going to talk about the third setup, which is going to be a more mobile setup. It's going to be most of what you've seen already, but with the addition of a little more portability. So for this, we're going to be doing the same thing. Tundra trackers on our hands and head, but this time we're going to add 3 Vive trackers in my case, but 3 other trackers, 1 for your hips, and then 2 for your feet. On top of that, I'm also using this iPhone holder that goes around your neck so that you can walk around with the iPhone. You can also use like a battery pack to make sure that the phone's always charging while you're walking around. And then I also have a chest mount for my Ultraleap so that when I'm walking around, as long as I have a long enough cable for the Ultraleap, it will be able to track my hands anywhere I am. So I think at this point you can probably guess where this is going. To add the feet and hips, all we got to do is go back to the setting menu, tracker assignment, and then figure out which trackers go to which body part. See, this one's my waist. All right, so I've got those all set up. So now I'm gonna calibrate again so I don't look like this. So now, as you can see, I have my full body here in VC face with my hips, you know, all of that. Of course, you need to make sure that you're able to be seen by your iPhone if you want the ARKit tracking. You can either have that on your desk or using the neck mount that I mentioned, and then of course the Ultraleap, you can do whatever you want with that as well. Again, I suggest chest mounting it if you're going to be walking around a bunch. So yeah, sorry, I just took off all the trackers because I don't have the proper straps for them right now, so I was kind of like just winging it a little bit there for that last clip. But yeah, as you can see, it requires a lot of trackers connected. We have 3 Tundra trackers and 3 Vive trackers just to get that full body to work. But you know, if you want to go full body, then now you know how to do it. So now at this point, I've gone over all 3 of the setups that I intended to. Of course, this is not the limitation of this software. You can do so many more combinations of any of these ideas. Let's say you want to play a VR game and you want to have full body, or you want to do half body but have it be portable. You can do all of that as well. It comes down to your own experimentation, but I think I've laid down the foundations well enough that you guys can experiment with that on your own with the knowledge you've gained. So that's going to do it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, join the Discord for MEEP. The link for that is actually down in the description as well. I am pretty responsive there and will answer any questions you may have about setting up any of this kind of stuff, any of this advanced tracking. So yeah, that's going to do it for me. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.